Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Nearly a quarter of rough sleepers in England live right here in London. Around 1,000 sleep on our streets. But in Southwark, rough sleepers have become the first to benefit from nurses who visit them to give medical help. It's been set up by Guy's and St Thomas's NHS Foundation Trust and supported by the homeless charity St Mungo's. Tory has more.
We have some dressings. We also bring out naloxone with us, so for anyone that overdoses, we can give that to them.
Ready and equipped to treat some of the capital's rough sleepers.
We can get him sorted.
Serena and Kendra are 2 of 6 nurses who go out and provide immediate health checks in Southwark. The first person they approach has a worrying rash on his face and lips.
He's basically had it there for a week. It's really sore for him. It's affecting his teeth as well. So what I'll do is prescribe him some cream that he can use 3 times a day, and that will stop him having to go into A&E, because if that gets any worse, spreads into the body or anything, he'll become quite unwell.
Morning.
The project aims to reduce reoccurring visits to A&E by people sleeping rough. The nurses typically see people with respiratory problems, wounds or in need of general health checks.
Any itchiness or? It's all right. If you look at hierarchy of needs, healthcare doesn't tend to come high up. It's about keeping warm, getting food and keeping safe. So bringing us to them is ensuring that healthcare does come on the forefront.
Rough sleepers use A&E around 4 times more than the average member of the public. And an indication of just how pressing health matters can be is that the life expectancy of a homeless man is 47 years old. It's even lower for women at just 43.
The nurses work in partnership with the homeless charity St Mungo's. It provides a crucial link to find those most in need.
At least 45–50% of the people we see have some form of health problem. It's hard to manage your health when you're rough sleeping. Wounds get infected, you can't keep clean. It can be very hard to access a GP.
This began as a pilot service but now has government funding until 2020.
Yeah, about 9:15, so that I can go for your blood results with you, yeah?
A simple idea that could make all the difference to some of the capital's most vulnerable people. Tory, BBC London News.
On the streets, in a hospital, a hostel or a B&B. Across the UK, the deaths of people without a home have gone unnoticed. Tonight, we're attempting to shed new light on a hidden tragedy. Research by the Bureau of Investigative Journalism suggests at least 449 homeless people have died in the UK in the last year, at least 65 of them on the streets. The homeless charity Crisis says the figures are deeply shocking. They want such deaths to be better investigated and recorded. Our Home Affairs correspondent Andy Davies has more.
Here we go.
You've got a couple of photos.
I've got a really old one.
Yes.
And I've got a recent one when he last had his hair done.
Michelle Cuthbert's friend Paul Bradley died in August, aged 52, apparently of natural causes. Brad, as he was known, had for much of the last 20 years been homeless, she says, and like her, alcohol dependent too.
So what did he mean to you then?
Everything. Absolutely everything. When we were sleeping outside together, we'd spend pretty much the whole 24 hours a day together.
So you looked after each other?
Yeah, definitely. Very codependent. Very, very codependent. I looked after him and he looked after me.
Paul Bradley's death in Taunton in Somerset is one of at least 7 linked to the homeless community here over the last year. 2 died outdoors, one on this car park roof on Boxing Day. But last Thursday, it was Paul Bradley whom they gathered to remember at the Open Door Drop-In Centre, where he came for food, clothes and friendship. David, himself formerly homeless, helped organise it.
We're having a special day in remembrance of Brad. Because otherwise they pass almost unnoticed, you know, like leaves falling from a tree and they're gone, aren't they? It's just to say, yes, he was appreciated, he was missed, he was loved, basically.
Precisely how the death of someone like Paul Bradley fits into a bigger UK-wide picture has, for so long, been almost impossible to assess accurately. there's been no central government body counting the numbers of those who die homeless, so no national record of their ages, their backgrounds, even their names. Today, after months of investigating this issue, the Bureau of Investigative Journalism presents a report as groundbreaking as it is stark.
Following our feature on Lindy Pring last December, who died homeless in a tent in Cardiff, the Bureau, with a network of contacts, set out to try to count other similar deaths, like that of Hamad Farahi, the physicist who lived in a car in Harlow and who died alone in emergency accommodation. Of Jane Simpson too, the mother of 5 who struggled with addictions and whom Channel 4 News filmed at a shelter before her death. The Bureau of Investigative Journalism used a definition of homelessness which includes rough sleepers, those in emergency accommodation like hostels and B&Bs, and sofa surfers. In Northern Ireland they counted those officially registered as homeless by the housing executive, people waiting to be housed, but who might be in temporary accommodation. Their research indicates at least 449 people died while homeless across the UK in the last 12 months. At least 65 of those died on the streets, others in hospitals, and another 47 in temporary accommodation. Where more than 300 others died has not been established.
3 of the cases we found were men whose bodies had been found in tents and they'd been left there for weeks or months possibly, and they were in a state of decomposition. In some cases it took DNA testing or dental records to identify them. And that was, you know, really shocking to know in the UK people are dying and rotting in tents at the side of the road or in hedgerows in woodlands, and nobody's noticing.
The research shows 69% of those who died were men and 21% were women. There's no data on the remaining 10%. The average age of death for the men in the figures was 49 and for women 53. Tonight, the Office for National Statistics has revealed that for the first time it's also going to be counting the deaths of homeless people in the UK. And in Taunton, filming last week, came a sharp reminder of just how precarious life on the streets can be. Can you hear me okay? We're going to get an ambulance, all right? We'd been beckoned to a man lying motionless on the ground, a pool of vomit before him, and we called 999. He was a rough sleeper, we were told, in his early 30s. We heard concerns he may have taken the drug Spice. His eyes were open, but he was barely responding.
Hiya, my name's Jim, I'm a paramedic. What are you taking?
Then, as the paramedic started helping him, there were shouts from across the bridge. Someone else had collapsed 100 yards away. He'd also been sick and initially unresponsive, but now looked and sounded almost out of control of his own body. More paramedics had been called, again amidst concerns he may have taken Spice. But we've not been able to establish what made this and the other man ill.
So one of the men has been taken off to hospital. The other individual who collapsed earlier is back up on his feet. He seems to be okay. It's difficult to know what to make of this, really. I mean, it was really shocking to witness, and yet a regular occurrence, according to one of the paramedics we spoke to.
Questions about what role, if any, substance misuse may have played in recent homeless deaths in Taunton was one factor which led to a council review earlier this year. It came after lobbying from this man, whose organisation works with the homeless in Taunton. What is the importance of a review like this, of being able to look back at these deaths?
Well, it really does open up a whole new area of understanding. If you review a dozen individuals who've died in this set of circumstances, there will be common themes. And if government is going to be spending money on programmes and on contracts to try and support these people to prevent that from happening, then that information is far more useful than perhaps conventional approaches to providing support.
But those calling for more reviews and now attempting to quantify homeless deaths know the challenge they face. Mapping often immensely complex lives, hidden from view, difficult to count, difficult to reach sometimes, even when the support services are there. Michelle Cuthbert is now in temporary accommodation finally, but she knows how costly years of rough sleeping can be.
You said that homelessness takes its toll on the body, and I wonder how you feel about yourself and your own health at the moment.
Health's not great, and a member of staff told me 2 years ago that they thought I was going to be the next one to go, and we've lost quite a few since then, so...
How old are you, Michelle?
What year is it, 2018? I'll be 47 in 4 weeks. Yeah, I'll be 47 in 4 weeks.
Not far off the age of Brad, the friend she lost earlier this year, and whose death is now being counted. Compiling an official record of those who die homeless in the UK, the first of its kind, has begun.
Well, earlier I spoke to Ben Humberstone, Head of Health Analysis at the Office for National Statistics, and I asked him how soon they'd be able to gather data on deaths across the homeless population in the UK.
So the information that we're able to ascertain through our analysis will be the key to providing, it will be the evidence base to providing the right services for some of the most vulnerable members of our society. We're aiming to get this right, to produce statistics of the right quality, and that's why we're publishing in before Christmas.
It's somehow shameful, isn't it, that people have been dying on the streets, rough sleeping, in temporary hostels and so on, and their deaths have not been officially counted. Why has it not happened until now?
It's a very difficult thing to do. It's only now, with the information that we've got, the access to the sources that we're able to access, and things like the Bureau of Investigative Journalism report, that will enable us to produce fairly authoritative statistics and analyses on deaths of homeless people.
Is there a moral duty to do this?
We need to support the most vulnerable members of our society through the evidence base that we're able to provide here at ONS. Remembering also that behind each one of these numbers there's a real human story and a tragedy in many cases, and we need to make sure that we understand as much as we can about that to ensure that the right support is put in place.
Ben Humberstone, thank you very much for joining us. Well, Matt Downey is Policy Director for Crisis, and David Tory, formerly homeless himself, is a campaigner and founder of the One Festival of Homeless Arts, and they're with me now in the studio. Matt Downey first. And Lindy Pring, who featured in Andy Davis' report there, was one of many tragedies who really sort of kicked off this journalistic effort. But the scale is shocking, isn't it?
It's hard to put into words, really, how shocking and appalling this is, and it's, you know, it's not simply the scale, the numbers, it's the indignity of people freezing or starving to death in their last days, or being completely neglected and alone in those last days. And just thinking about the scale of that, if this isn't a national emergency, I don't know what is. And it's not simply because of that, it's because we know what to do to end homelessness.
Well, David Tory, you lived rough, slept in your car, didn't you? I mean, when you look at those individual stories and the numbers, what goes through your mind?
Could have been me. I was saved by a park enforcement officer on a park bench. If he hadn't walked through within a 20-second period of time, I would have been dead. I see guys on the streets just asking for someone to talk to. You know, we all have the power and the ability to stop and actually talk to somebody. We're human beings, is what we do. Except we have this fear to talk to homeless people. We seem to dehumanise them, and that's becoming a massive problem, and that's why there's so many deaths on our street.
And if you're homeless yourself, you often feel invisible to the authorities?
Yeah, you do. You sort of, and also you tend to try and back off from the authorities because, you know, you're scared that they're going to, you know, arrest you for something, for being homeless. You know, you're criminalised for being the actual, the result of a problem, which is, obviously, we know what the bigger problem is.
Matt Downey, why does a number matter? Why, you know, each of these figures represent a personal tragedy. Why does that overall number matter?
Well, the number matters because we need to treat homeless people as human beings and count their lives and their deaths, these tragedies, as we would everybody else. But it also matters because every single person who's homeless is a housing target for this country. The answer to homelessness is to house people and then support people to keep those homes. So it's important we know exactly how many people are homeless and what's happening to them when they're homeless. And also, if somebody does die, that there's a review into the circumstances. It's just not conceivable that we won't learn lessons to prevent further deaths.
And the circumstances are often really baffling, aren't they? I mean, Andy Davies' report featured a physicist who was sleeping in his car. You served the country in the army as a chef, didn't you? You cooked for the Queen.
Yeah, I served for 6 years, back from 91 to 97. You tend to find that there are a lot of people out there, especially ex-forces, who suffer with PTSD. You know, we send people away to war to protect us, you know, to give us a safe place to sleep at night. These guys come back and then they end up on streets, whether it's through mental health problems, addiction, you know, loss of a family member, etc. And they then get criminalised, and we're supposed to be then protecting them, but we don't. You know, and I think this is a massive problem.
I mean, there's also that sort of sense that it could be anyone who ends up on the street homeless, right?
Yeah. I ended up on the street. I had my own business, you know, through my mental health breaking down and a collaboration of problems, you know, and health problems, and I ended up on the street because there wasn't the help there. You know, there is help, but when you're a single male, you're less likely to be helped. And
it's by and large way more men than women are sleeping rough. I asked the guy from the ONS if there was a kind of moral imperative to count these numbers properly and officially. What's your answer to that?
I think there is a moral imperative, but there's also a kind of a practical imperative. You know, the more you know about a problem, the more you can do about it. That's simply where we should start with this, because we shouldn't put up with homelessness. These numbers are beyond appalling. It's a national disgrace. We need to take the numbers and take the lessons from it and make sure this never happens again.
Matt Downey, David Tovey, thank you very much for joining us.